Hello everyone, welcome back to copycamp. My name is Jarosław Lipszyc and I am a moderator of today's session. Our conference started 9 years ago and we are very happy that we can meet again in 2020, unfortunately in this online pandemic format. During copycamp we discuss copyright in an interesting and engaging way. This is a conference about the law, but it's not a law conference. It's the conference on social impacts of intellectual property and related regulations. Copycamp is being organized by Modern Poland Foundation, a small non-profit organization from Warsaw, Poland, obviously. We are running the most popular digital library in Poland, which is called Wolne Lektury, which translates into English as free books. And this is the reason why we began to be interested in copyright in the first place. And we are really happy that you share this passion with us. I would like to thank our partner, Google, who decided to support copycamp in this unusual year, despite out of necessity of unusual format. In the first part of the session, speakers will speak for 12 to 15 minutes. And after that, we will start questions and answer session. So please stay with us. You could ask questions on YouTube chat or on the copycamp.pl webpage. We will choose to ask as many questions to our guests as possible. If there is anything we should improve, please let us know in the comments. This is the very first time we organize such online conference, and we are really willing to learn from this experience. The title of today's session is Directive 2019-790 Implementation and Interpretation. And our speakers today are Julia Kalpokene and Alkistis Kempari. Julia is an associate at Lithuanian law firm Juris Consultus, specializing in intellectual property, IT, and data protection. Julia is also PhD candidate at Vitatuas Magnus University, where she teaches technology law course. Julia research focuses on technology and its regulation, with particular focus on artificial intelligence generated works and copyright. The title of her presentation is Machine versus Author, Text and Data Mining for Commercial Use. Julia, the floor is yours.
Hello, let me share my presentation. And I hope you can see it. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you all tonight. I work, as well introduced, I work at a commercial law firm, and I'm also a PhD candidate, and I tend to think that my approach is rather practical. When I look at the text of any piece of legislation, I cannot help but think, what will I have to tell my clients when they ask what to expect or how to comply? I will talk about text and data mining and the EU Directive on copyright and related rights in the digital single market. My focus is the commercial application of TDM, and therefore my aim was to talk tonight about Article 4. However, I feel that it cannot be discussed in isolation without providing at least a bit of broader context. Therefore, I will briefly discuss Article 3 of the Directive, as well as along with the recitals. This, I believe, will help and lead to posing some questions in relation to Article 4 and TDM for commercial use. My aim is to provoke some thoughts and a discussion on TDM and copyright limitations relating to it. Certainly, not to provide answers, as it is still early days and it remains to be seen how the provisions of the directive will be implemented in the national laws of each member state. The directive has been much discussed and criticized, but I feel that Article 4 has not attracted enough attention. Article 4 has not been discussed much, and on the face of it, it may appear to be not a controversial one. It promises an exception for TDM, but will it deliver? With legislative changes, it is important not only to have great ideas, but to implement them well with effectiveness and enforcement in mind. Sometimes good idea backed by noble intentions may be rendered of little value if the provision cannot be applied. Article 3 and 4 of the Directive are dedicated to TDM. However, recitals are informative too, and TDM is extensively mentioned there. Okay, sorry, it seems that I have some technical issues and my presentation is not working at the moment. Here we are. Sorry for the technical issues. So Article 2 provides a list of important definitions with some additional information and clarification on these contained in various recitals. So as per subsection 2 of Article 2, text and data mining means any automated analytical technique aimed at analyzing text and data in digital form in order to generate information which includes but is not limited to patterns, trends, and correlations. Recital 8 provides a bit more context by explaining that new technologies enable the automated computational analysis of information in digital form, such as text, sounds, images, or data, generally known as text and data mining. It continues by stating the aims of TDM. Text and data mining makes the processing of large amounts of information with a view to gaining new knowledge and discovering new trends possible. So why is TDM important? The importance of TDM is also explained in the recitals. The fields of research, innovation, education, and preservation of cultural heritage are singled out in particular. In Recital 8, it is stated that, quote, text and data mining technologies are prevalent across the digital economy. However, there is widespread acknowledgement that text and data mining can, in particular, benefit the research community and in so doing support innovation, end of quote. It is clear from the recitals that the Directive is preoccupied with research and innovation. Commercial application, therefore, was not the focus. Thus, as I will discuss, the limitation for commercial use is not robust and can be opted out. Some academics argue that the scope of the text and data mining exception should be broader. It is suggested by some that if the scope of the TDM exception is too narrow, this risks stifling innovation. It is also argued by some for an extended scope for the TDM exception beyond research organizations to cover all those enjoying lawful access to materials, and call for an exception applicable both to commercial and non-commercial uses. There have even been suggestions to allow the TDM exception so that everyone could carry out TDM on lawfully accessible content, as well as permitting research organizations to carry out TDM on content to which they do not have lawful access. Anyway, it is important to consider other factors that may restrict TDM activities, which among others include lack of legal certainty, which leads to the fear of being sued, inaccessible information silos and difficulties involved in linking the varied information upon collection, lack of quality tools or applications for TDM and appropriately skilled people to use them, as well as an inability to obtain standardized content from multiple sources. So, turning to Article 3, it introduces a mandatory exception which will allow research organizations and cultural heritage institutions to use text and data mining techniques on works to which they have lawful access, solely for the purpose of scientific research. Subsection 2 of Article 3 allows for copies of the works to be retained by the researchers for the purposes of the scientific research and also for verification purposes. Copies of such works must be stored with an appropriate level of security, and member states shall encourage relevant parties to define commonly agreed best practices to facilitate this exception. Subsection 3 permits right holders to apply reasonable security measures to the networks and databases where works are hosted to secure the original work. Recital 14 provides guidance that lawful access can include open access policies or contractual arrangements. In other recitals, it is provided that the exception extends to private partners conducting TDM for the purposes of scientific research in the framework of a public-private partnership with a research organization or cultural heritage institution, and clarified that the term scientific research includes both natural and human sciences. Recitals 15 and 16 clarifies that both in respect to subsection 2 and 3 of the Article 3, the measures applied should be proportionate. Article 4 of the Directive creates an obligation to allow for the reproduction and extraction of lawfully accessible works for the purposes of text and data mining. However, there is a caveat, provided that the works are not explicitly restricted by the right holders. While research organizations and cultural heritage institutions benefit from the Article 3, then everyone else is left with Article 4. However, while Article 4 covers a much broader group of users, its application is more limited than Article 3. Article 4 allows for acts of reproduction and extraction from databases and other sources for the purposes of TDM generally, and it is not preoccupied with the motive behind the TDM, as there is no purpose requirement or limitation like in Article 3. Therefore, commercial applications of TDM fall within Article 4. However, Article 4 contains an opt-out provision for right holders, which means that they can exclude their copyright works from the scope of Article 4 by expressly reserving their rights in an, quote, appropriate manner such as machine-readable means in the case of content made publicly available online, end of quote. So accordingly, an appropriate manner would, for example, be technological restrictions on extraction from online databases and other sources. Other such appropriate means could include contractual restrictions or a unilateral reservation of rights. So to sum up, right holders should be able to apply measures to ensure that the reservations in regard to TDM are respected. It is unclear how the opt-out mechanism will work and whether it will be effective. As there is no unified prescribed way of opting out, it can be anticipated that there will be various ways to opt out adopted by the right holders. So one is clear, the directive set out to provide for the TDM exception, and I suggest it offers a full sense of security. Article 4, with one hand, delivers the copyright limitation for TDM for commercial use, and with another hand, takes it away by providing for the opt-out mechanism. Here, I do not advocate for a broader TDM exception. Many arguments may be made for and against it. I simply say that the directive fails to address the issue, and perhaps it even created an environment where both the right holders and those wanting to employ TDM are burdened. An author is required to take steps in order to opt out. Tech and legal savviness is therefore required, which means that it will require additional financial resources and or perhaps time to do so, because people will have to seek help and assistance to opt out. And then the issue of enforcement sticks out. How can I be certain that my work has not been used and my rights have not been infringed? How can it be traced, checked, and verified? The same goes for those wanting to use TDM. Say a startup setting out on a mission to offer lucrative new innovation on the back of TDM. Without the unified opt-out mechanism and with the risk that there might be opt-outs which they may miss and end up in lengthy litigation, could it deter innovation? It creates additional burden on the businesses. They need to have proper checks in place, with little certainty what to await and how to prepare well for it. So what are the takeaways? I suggest that Article 4 fails to deliver what it had promised. The title of the talk was rather thought-provoking, and the line machine versus author might have suggested that there are two different opposing sides. However, with Article 4 of the directive in mind, my suggestion is that they're both in the same boat. I would rather frame it that it is small or standalone entrepreneurs versus the big companies which have the resources to deal with the requirements of Article 4 and opt-out mechanism and checking it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Please keep in mind that you can ask questions to Julia on YouTube chat. Already some questions have been asked, but Julia will answer that after we finish the presentation. Now I would like to invite Alkistis Kumpari, who holds a PhD in law from University of Nantes, and her PhD thesis is entitled Autor's Rights and Commercially Unavailable Works, which examines solutions in order to make currently unavailable works accessible to the public. She's interested in digital rights management, technologies, and copyright law in cultural heritage institutions. The title of the presentation is From Orphan to Out of Commerce Works, Framing Digital Access in Pandemic Terms. Alkistis, the floor is yours.
So thank you. Hello. I'm gonna share my screen. So, hello, I am going to talk about the Orphan Works Directive and the Articles 8 to 11 of the new Copyright Directive, as well as their implementation in French law. So, these texts have created a framework that allows the digitization and making available of orphaned and out of commerce works that are in the collections of cultural institutions. The problem here is the uncertainty concerning the legal status of these works and thus failure to get in touch with the right holders and negotiate licenses. So I'm going to give some definitions. Orphan works are works which are protected by copyright and for which no right holder is identified or located. Out-of-commerce works are works that are not available to the public through customary channels of commerce. So the two categories overlap because orphan works are, as a general rule, works that are no longer subject to commercial distribution. And because of this situation, over time, it makes it harder to identify the owners. The same challenges apply to out-of-commerce works, namely works for which the right holder can, in principle, be located, but rights clearance is too cumbersome and high transaction costs involved become unrealistic for cultural institutions. So both cases are problematic when it comes to mass digitization for the creation of digital libraries. Despite the common legal challenges, the European legislator set out two different legal frameworks: the Directive on certain permitted uses of orphan works and the articles of the new Copyright Directive. So I'd like to share some thoughts regarding the interactions between these two legal frameworks. So I will start from the Orphan Works Directive, which sets out an exception to copyright for some cultural institutions by allowing them to digitize and make the orphan works available to the public. And what we need to know is that the directive has been transposed verbatim in France in 2015. So I am going to mention one key criteria set out in this regulation, which is the diligent search of right holders. So a work will qualify as an orphan work only after a diligent search has been carried out and it is established that the right holders cannot be identified or located. So from a legal point of view, this thing can lead to legal uncertainty. To begin with, there is no clear definition of what constitutes diligent search. The French law produces a detailed list of sources that is mandatory for the organizations to search. However, this list remains indicative. And in fact, the law expects to check every source in the list and then go even further. Moreover, the diligent search is not verified by an authority. The role of the Ministry of Culture is to forward the results of the research at the European Union Intellectual Property Office and at the Orphan Works European database. So in France, there is no independent body who can offer guidance, who can indicate the relevant sources, and so there is no flexible definition of the diligent search requirement. And from a practical point of view, many associations stated that the Orphan Works Directive failed to provide the much needed solution for the problem of orphan works. And there is a reason why I insist in the diligent search requirement. It's because it doesn't exist in the new directive. So the new provisions can be seen as a new opportunity to make these categories of digitally unavailable works accessible. So let's start from the beginning. Licensing solutions feature in the new directive. To be more accurate, the system of extended collective licensing, the so-called Nordic system, which applied in Scandinavian countries since the 1960s. According to the Article 8, member states shall provide that a collective management organization may conclude a non-exclusive license for non-commercial purposes, irrespective of whether all right holders covered by the license have mandated the collective management organization. So the effects of the agreement extend also to right holders who are not members of the organization. There are some conditions, though, which is the collective management organization must be, on the basis of its mandates, sufficiently representative of right holders. That means that the organization must have a broad membership among the potential right holders, and it must have a mandate from the right holders in the relevant category of works and rights covered. This is not a trivial issue because the legitimacy of licenses crucially relies on this representativeness. And in many member states, including France, collective management of copyright is not widespread. So that is why the European Commission acknowledges that the licensing scheme may fall short for many European countries, and only these cases proposes the alternative of an exception to copyright. The exception scheme is pretty simple. It is not detailed at all. So the Commission hasn't given up the idea to authorize uses by an exception. This observation makes the interactions and frictions between orphaned and out-of-commerce works all the more interesting. So I'm going to state the obvious, that out-of-commerce works include orphan works. And the reciters of the directive make that obvious when they say that out-of-commerce works are works for which obtaining the prior authorization of the individual right holders can be very difficult due to their age, their limited commercial value, or the fact that they have never been exploited commercially. These never-in-commerce works can include posters, leaflets, amateur audiovisual works, etc. And all these works are most likely orphan works. So, in practice, there is a serious overlap between the two directives. That means that cultural heritage institutions have to deal with a triple system: an orphan works exception, an out-of-commerce work and out-of-commerce works licenses, and an out-of-commerce works exception. Which one we prefer? For starters, I must say that I prefer the broader definition, because the new copyright directive has a very broad scope of application. There are no restrictions. It applies simply to works that are permanently in the collection of the institution. Moreover, the new copyright directive allows a broader spectrum of uses and not only online uses. The new framework from the new copyright directive saves the cultural heritage institutions from the burden of the diligent search. The new licensing scheme refers to reasonable efforts. These reasonable efforts to determine if works are not available to the public through customary channels of commerce doesn't have to be repeated over time, and there is no mandatory work-by-work search. This is why the new directive is an opportunity to review or retract the orphan work provisions in place in France. Or, in case nothing happens, it's an opportunity for institutions to circumvent these provisions and use works in their collections under the definition of out-of-commerce works. As far as articles of the new directive are concerned, I must say that the extending collective licensing scheme is promising. And from my point of view, it is better to encourage licensing than set up exceptions. But it is true that the licensing scheme should be functioning and should fulfill the condition of representativeness. And this might be complicated in France. I must say that the recital 33 of the directive dictates that member states have flexibility in determining the criteria of representativeness, and they can choose the specific type of licensing mechanism. This type could be presumptions of representations or extended collective licensing. In this perspective, I can't help but compare Articles 8 to 11 with the Article 12 of the new copyright directive. This new article allows provisions allowing collective licensing with an extended effect. And this article, the Article 12, gives also member states the flexibility in choosing the specific type of mechanism, allowing this extended effect. And this mechanism could be the Nordic model of extended collective licensing, or a legal mandate or a presumption to represent right holders. In France, the Nordic model of extended collective licensing is not in accordance with the legal traditions, but there are many schemes of statutory collective management. Legal provisions in France require that collective management organizations receive authorization from the culture minister following criteria such as diversity among members, the importance of the repertoire, or the human and material resources proposed. And let's not forget the French Act on the digital exploitation of out-of-print books of the 20th century, which is an original scheme of presumed management. According to this law, to this act, a French collective management organization in the written sector has been authorized to manage digital rights in books registered as unavailable. So with this in mind, in France, many collective management organizations could be managing digital rights for out-of-commerce works, but only if the law gives a clear mandate to the collective management organizations, and only if the deed of addition that authors sign makes reference to the rights relating to out-of-commerce works. But it's true that in some cases, there simply are no organizations that grant licenses for unpublished materials, for instance. So I think that it is inevitable that the law will provide for an exception. I said earlier that the exception scheme is not detailed at all. Moreover, the exception set out establishes pretty different conditions than the licensing scheme. So I don't have the time to get in details, but it is safe to say that the provisions governing out-of-commerce works are complex. And that is why stakeholder dialogue is important. It is very important to consult all interested parties regarding issues like the definition of out-of-commerce works and the reasonable effort to determine these words, issues like guidance on the existing collective management organizations and on the type of rights they represent. And as far as France is concerned, this dialogue seems to be failing because France chose to implement many provisions of the directive by decree as a part of a law that implements various European Union directives. The executive orders to transpose Articles 8 to 11 have to be issued within 12 months from November. Certainly because the government wants to speed up adoption under the excuse of the pandemic, and as it has already been pointed out, the government wants to sidestep substantial discussion in Parliament. So I fear that the resulting law will lack important details contained in Articles 8 to 11 and will carry out a rushed implementation. These important details may be the functioning of the European online portal or the information and publicity measures to inform right holders that the works have been mentioned as out-of-commerce works. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. That was perfect. Now we move on to the questions, and I got plenty of them. The first one is to Julia. Is there any reason for the rights holders not to restrict text and data mining and thereby extract extra license fees from researchers?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think it's same as with other works. We have different license arrangements, and there've always been people, authors, willing to share their creations, willing to share their work with others and provide it to be used free of charge. We have an example of open source programs, for example, where you can use it for free. You've got, for example, photographs, which you can use for free without license fees. So I think this is the same here as well. Of course, those that want to benefit are free to impose those restrictions and benefit from what they do. But I think there will be people willing to share what they create and that knowledge. And even now, we share our data, and data is of big value. And I think here we will see that there will be people willing to share for one reason or another. So I think it's a personal choice, and I think it's something of everyone's conviction, whatever they believe in.
Thank you. And another question is why ordinary citizen should care about the right for text and data mining? Aren't we being watched too much, not too little?
Well, I think if if one doesn't want to care about text and data mining, and they're happy to put things out there, say in the internet somewhere where the work that person has created will be freely accessible. If they don't care to know about the opt-out, then they will not opt out, and then their work might be mined, but then perhaps it will do no harm to that particular person. I think it gets trickier when we move into this sphere where the product of text and data mining competes directly with those creations, with those works that are being used for TDM. So, for example, if we get artificial intelligence that creates good artwork that is being sold for huge sums of money, then those artists that also sell their art might be very well, they would pay attention and put effort to restrict TDM in their works. So I think you have to pay attention when the works that you shares your livelihood. But if you're just one-off and you don't really mind, then I think there is no reason to worry about it too much, because no one will know that it's your work. It's just the data that can be extracted from it most of the time. So no one is watching you. That's fine.
Thank you. Another question is for Alkistis. Do we have any place on the internet for GLAM institutions where the debate on the directive is taking place? Are you aware of organizations or networks which are engaged in this debate?
I can't say right now like this. I can send some links because I attended from the internet last week a meeting of Europeana who was talking about GLAM institutes. So I would be happy to share the links and my notes, but like this right now, no, I'm not. I can't really say.
Okay, thank you. So if you could do this in the YouTube chat, we will send you the link after the after we finish the session. Another question is to Julia. What would you advise to an organization wanting to do text and data mining in Europe? Move elsewhere?
Well, I think moving elsewhere would not help. You could mine elsewhere, but no, I mean, it remains to be seen. I don't believe that everyone will opt out, as we had this previous question, and I think that there will be people that will not restrict, will not opt out. And also, it depends on the project and on the budget, and there will be databases that will have license fees, and it remains to be seen how high those fees would be, and it would depend on the data that you require. But then there will be ways to access that data and to mine it. So it's not wide. It's not like free internet and you do whatever you want. But there will be ways to actually do it legally, because we have this in the directive. And whenever you mine data, you have to have you have to access that data legally. So you have to have permission to access it. So I think there will be movements for to open up data. So there will be avenues to get it for free one way or another. It might require more investment than than otherwise, because you would have to check whether the person has opted out or not. But then I think there will be paid services where you could just pay and then get access to data without worrying whether there are any opt-outs or not. So I think there is no need to run away. There've been many talks about leaving Europe when data protection laws were introduced, but we've learned to live with it, and I think we will learn to live with it here with this directive too.
Maria Świetlik is commenting, text and data mining is an important tool also for political or social movements, and they usually don't have sufficient resources to pay all licenses needed. That's why it should be a matter of public interest. But there is also another question for you. You said such as machine-readable means. So other means are also possible or not? Is a restriction in terms of use enough? And what about works behind paywall?
So yes, in the case of content that has been made publicly available online, it should only be considered appropriate to reserve those rights by the use of machine-readable means. But what it could be metadata, which then a person could not read that easily without extra tools. But then, for example, terms and conditions of a website or a service would also be a suitable means, because it is machine readable, but it is readable to humans too. So I hope I answered the question. And about the paywall. Well, with the paywall, it will depend on the terms and services of the service. So as I mentioned before, I believe there will be services offered. And it is even the case now. For example, some of the publishers offer special licenses for TDM, and then they open up that data that they have in their databases. So if there is a paywall, then you have to look whether the license is sufficient for TDM, whether it's suitable for whatever reason you want to use it. And just a short comment on the previous comment in respect to organizations and non-profit. I think I agree that governments and non-profit organizations, data for them is vital to do what they do. And I believe that there's been in recent years quite a lot of push to open up data, that governments would open up data available to them. And I think that should continue, and from that data, then it should be made available to everyone, especially to NGOs, to use it and for their reasons, for their work.
Thank you. Marcin asks to Alkistis, but doesn't France have to maintain the implementing provision of the Orphan Works Directive since it's still in force? Should it be repealed at the European Union level?
That's a good question. I think that yes. I think that basically, yes, it should be the Orphan Works Directive. It should be retracted. There is an European Orphan Works survey, a public consultation to see the process of implementation of the Orphan Works Directive. There is also a public consultation to see where we stand on the digitization of cultural heritage content in the institutions. All these things happen at the same time of the implementation of the new copyright directive. I don't know. I know that many associations, many organizations don't think that the Orphan Works Directive failed to achieve its goal. So the exception is better or more convenient for the cultural heritage organizations than the licensing scene, because it is more easy for them to just digitize and make accessible works. But if they want to stick to the law, the diligent search of right holders, didn't offer anything, didn't change anything for them.
This is exactly our opinion as well, because as you know, we are running public domain, free as in freedom, digital library, and we are a non-profit organization. And we get like a lot of hopes when the Orphan's work the directive was being prepared. We've been traveling to Brussels to discuss, and actually it was a Polish MP who was pushing forward this directive, and it was completely useless. It was, completely. It was too much legal risk. It was too much work. It was too expensive, and this didn't solve any single problem it should solve. And we are we are like the organization which should benefit from such a solution. Do you think this will change? Do you think we can get some hopes now that after the implementation of this directive, we actually will be able to use the works which are orphaned?
Yes. First of all, there is the other set of opinions that many organizations also think that the directive helped them. The exception, the legal framework of the exception helped them to digitize and make accessible, available the works of their collections. But I think that if we, legally speaking, there is always the legal uncertainty that we don't know. The cultural heritage institutions take always the risk that they can be sued, they can't be sued, they can't fix a budget, they can't know if they will pay the fair compensation if a right holder appears. So with the new directive, yes, I think that if it's implemented correctly, which it's a little bit difficult, I think that yes, I think that the cultural heritage institutions will be more able to get in contact with organizations, collective management organizations, and I think that they will push the dialogue in order to introduce a more effective exception in their legal systems. But I think also that the member states don't pay attention to this legal framework, to these provisions, and so that the dialogue would not be held correctly as it should be.
Thank you. And we got the last question for Julia. Is the United Kingdom text and data mining exception better? Will they have an advantage after Brexit, since they said they will not implement the directive?
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, they said they would not implement the directive because the Brexit happened and they're not going to implement it. It remains to be seen what deal there is, if there is any. Yes, for now they appear to be better off in respect to TDM. But then again, just I think a month or few weeks ago, I saw that there was a consultation going on in the UK about artificial intelligence and copyright. So we can't be sure what changes will be there in due course. So it remains to be seen.
Thank you. And the last question from me to actually both of you is we got like a recurring problem of noble goals, and then we fail to get there. I mean, and sometimes we fail on the directive level, sometimes we fail on the implementation level, but in general, Europe seems to be unable to actually protect the rights of the people, the users' rights, the rights of the readers, the rights of general public, and the rights of culture itself, in a quite systematic way. Do you think the pandemic is going to change it, or is it, business as usual? Some people will get more money because we move our lives to the internet, and basically that's it.
Well, that's a very good question. And I think it's very difficult with legislation. You can't be good for everyone. So whenever you have, if we say, for example, if we have a regulation rather than a directive, then some countries will be less happy than others because it will be directly applicable. And then you kind of miss the national level bit. So you can't do wrong on that level because it will be directly applicable. However, then it must be watered down to fit everyone's needs. And then when we have a directive, then it fails at the implementation level because the countries may choose what to do, and some are better at implementing it in their national laws, others are not as good, and then you have different interest groups. But it's very difficult to find that great, what fits everyone or what would be the best in each situation. So I think with pandemic, I think people get more exposure to different things because everything is online, so you don't have to travel. So even if you can't travel, you can access more information and more different forums for discussion. So I think it could bring positive change, but it remains to be seen how we adapt and whether non-governmental, non-for-profit organizations, whether different movements will persevere enough to actually secure that their views are being heard at higher level, whether it's at member states or at European Union level.
I agree. I think that it's very difficult, but I think that there will be a positive change. I think that the users and the associations can be more easily heard now in pandemic terms. So their words, their propositions can be heard, can be valued differently now in pandemic terms. That is why it is crucial to participate in the stakeholders' dialogue. Now that the new copyright directive is in a process of implementation, there's still time to hear all the stakeholders and to exploit, if you want, the context of pandemic.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank our speakers. It was really interesting session, and I'm really happy that we've been able to have you today. I would like to thank all the audience for all the questions and for active participation. I hope you all enjoyed today's session. We are waiting for your comments. As I said, this is the very first time we are organizing such a conference, so any feedback is very valuable for us. And I invite everyone for tomorrow's session, which starts 5 p.m. Central European Time. Please check the program at copycamp.pl. Tomorrow the session will be titled Game of Money, Copyright and Gaming Industry. So a little bit of Friday fun with copyright. And that's all for today. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Alkistis. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.